What is the most significant innovation in braces that we've seen in the last 50 years? Think about the things that have come and gone, some that have stuck around. I say that the clear winner has got to be the bracket prescription. It made us more efficient. It significantly reduced the doctor time, which is what allowed us to really scale our practices from 20 or 30 patients a day to double or triple that amount. And it also made us elevate our outcomes. And if you look at 1980s as being the golden age of orthodontics, I would say the underlying reason really for that is this huge innovation. We went from zero RX to get it to having an appliance that got us much closer to the bullseye right out the gate. And it's also why I think braces have not kept up with inflationary costs. So today, at 1980s priced braces would be somewhere north of $12,000. But because we have this system that now allowed us to treat more patients and maintain the quality, it really allowed us to not have to raise our prices year after year like the rest of the markets were. And so we are able to service way more patients today because of the bracket prescription at a lower price point than we were back in the 1980s. The real, I think, evidence that the bracket prescription is the biggest thing to hit fixed appliances is how fast it penetrated the market. So in less than a decade, brackets with a prescription became the new norm. And that doesn't happen often. There's not very many things in the adoption curve that in the orthodontic space that really fit that mold. And if I were to offer you, in fact, going back to that old zero prescription bracket system, a lifetime supply, you never had to pay for those braces again, but they had to be zero RX, would you take that deal? And I hope the answer is no, because we have to do all of the work with a zero prescription bracket as the doctor. And so we're not doing as good a quality because we don't get to focus on the smaller details as early in the process. And I also think that we're not going to be able to see even a third of the number of patients in a day that we're able to because of that innovation. So just realize that there's a cost to not using proper technology. This isn't to say that every top technology is worth it and we should go out and buy every technology that comes to the market. I really think you need to do a very critical return on investment analysis anytime you're thinking about making a change. But when it comes to the bracket prescription, it had such obvious benefits that every part, every category of the customer adoption cycle within a decade was really trending that direction. So what a massive improvement for our specialty. I really quickly wanted to go through disclosure. I work with a lot of companies. I love helping make products better for practitioners. It's just a passion of mine. And these are the ones that I'm working with currently. I've worked with about as many in the past as well. The big biases for today are obviously KLOwen, and I also want to point out that OrthoSelect, their DIBS platform, is who we use to power our digital setups, and the DIBS AI technology that's getting ready to come out with KLOwen this fall is something that I helped with, and I'm really excited about having a automatic artificial intelligence digital setup available for in-office workflow. So let's just kind of take a couple other little examples into the Rogers product adoption curve. So self-ligation, right? Been around for 20 to 30 years now, yet even after all of those decades, it's only hit into the 20 to 30% part of that market share. So self-ligation, cool stuff, very good, I think a great technology, but self-ligation primarily helps staff delegation. It might reduce our kind of number of visits to the office a little bit, but it doesn't save a ton on doctor time. It doesn't reduce our detailing. It doesn't reduce any of the customization that we have to put in as doctors. And so for the extra cost, it's worth it for some, but by no means has it totally transformed the industry because it's an assistant saver more than it is a doctor time saver. And if you look at the problem with the way that the brackets that we use today is it is a one size fits all system. Yes, there's a prescription based on hundreds of kids with perfect bites and perfect skeletal patterns and perfect shaped teeth, but a one size fits all truly fits nobody perfectly. And the issues that we're going to face with this are going to be first order discrepancies because teeth shapes aren't the same from one person to the next. And even they're not the same from the right side to the left side often. And so if you need those marginal ridges to fit perfectly and the central groove to line up exactly where it needs to go, you're going to have first order discrepancies in every case that you see. So you're going to have to do some in and out adjustment. And then the bigger issue and the harder one for us to control is the third order discrepancies. If you look at a Sure Smile wire, at their finishing wires especially, you'll notice that there's torque built into almost every single tooth. So the brackets that we slap on the teeth, even if they're in a great position, they're not expressing the correct torque. And so we end up having to do different things and trying to shortcut it using usually step bends and second order adjustments to address a third order issue. But Sure Smile, you can really get a good sense of how off our prescription is when it comes to the third order. And if you look at the brackets that we use in the finishing wire, there's 45 degrees of play. So if you have a tooth suspended between two others on that wire, if there's 22.5 degrees of slop on each bracket between a 1925 wire and the 22 slot height, that tooth can actually travel 45 degrees. And so if you look at what that means digitally, you'll see that this lingual cusp is way too far to the palate and the marginal ridges don't line up. But as I take that up, so there we're getting close to our ideal position, and now it's plunging the other direction. So with 45 degrees of play, how do we get any of those teeth where they belong? How do we get marginal ridges lining up? How do we get the lingual cusp where it needs to be? And the answer is usually we don't. Usually we just we rely on settling, or we require just ourselves to do step bends, which is really a second order compensation for a third order discrepancy, because we have such little control over the third order, especially in the posterior teeth. But we just have had to compromise with that. It's been one of the limitations of our bracket prescription to date. And if you look at these two patients, the class 3 skeletal pattern, class 2 skeletal pattern, and you just think to yourself, should we be using the same braces on these teeth? The answer is absolutely we shouldn't be. But when you have a one-size-fits-all system like we do, we have to design that one-size-fits-all system to work in both of these categories. So there's so much play in the third order, and it's really because we have to have that play there. Otherwise, we can cause ourselves a lot of issues. So this is why we don't fill the slot. So if you're using a conventional bracket system, please don't put in full-size arch wires, because you can create a lot of problems for your patient if you do. And this is where treatment planning, still with custom treatment, I think is even more critical. Diagnosis and treatment planning with digital custom appliances, I think is more critical and more important than it is in what we're doing today, because when you plan that movement, it's going to absolution. So think about today though, our brackets, especially when it comes to torque, is having a dog on the leash, right? So when I go on a dog walk with my Yorkie, I walk 250 yards to the park in a straight line. But my dog goes back and forth and forwards and backwards and left and right in every which direction possible before ending up finally at the dog park, right? So think about this as our bracket. We put our bracket on, we put our first wire in, we put our second wire in, the changes in direction, then we repo, and then we wire bend, and then there's side effect movements from that wire bend, so we put more wire bends. So we're really moving the teeth from A to D to K to T to Y, and then finally to Z. And so every tooth is traveling this kind of convoluted path like a dog. So we make sure that with the leash that the dog doesn't go too far off to one side or the other, but we're not really controlling that movement in a very precise way. And what if we have 28 teeth that we're trying to move? Imagine walking 28 dogs on leashes, and think of the effort and energy that you'd have to put in to get the dogs where you want them at the park at the end. It takes a ton of energy and effort. And that's what all of the customization that we put into these, this one size fits all, the customization really comes in as the orthodontist doing the repos and the wire bending. So we're spending 1 to 2 hours with every patient, bending wire, repositioning brackets in order to get those teeth where they belong. Tons of energy and effort. So when you go to a custom solution, you have to keep all of those teeth on a short leash. You want them all going straight from A to Z. You want them taking the path of least resistance. So the fun thing with this is we're really reducing round tripping. We're minimizing inflammation. We're minimizing discomfort if the teeth aren't constantly changing direction and kicking in the new pain cascade. So I think this is going to be healthier movement. And certainly if we're not changing tooth movement direction, it's going to be less discomfort for the patient overall. So slot filling, have to do it with digital. It really is the critical thing. It's what I found out of all the different systems. This was the biggest must do if you want to have it actually be worthwhile. So looking at this class 3 patient, if we put in red, here's the teeth positions that we want at the end of treatment. And if you look at the torque prescription needed for that, it's a 5-degree upper, negative 12-degree lower torque. And you can't even find that anywhere in the world of orthodontics today. That prescription just doesn't exist, but that's what this patient needs. And if you just were to go with a Roth MBT, something in that kind of range with torque values for the anterior teeth, you can see very quickly that you're going to end up with a lot of problems in that lower tooth. You're either going to get root resorption as you drive the root into the lingual cortical plate. You're going to get fenestration, dehiscence, recession, all sorts of issues. This is why general dentists should not be doing slot filling custom brackets. This is an orthodontist only product. You have to, again, be perfect at diagnosing and treatment planning. So this is only a tool for specialists, and it will always only be a tool for specialists because it needs a specialist to have their eye on it. So I think we're going to need to be better at all of these things in terms of diagnosis and treatment planning. Those skills need to be elevated. But the fun thing is that the automation, once you do that, is really very powerful. So if you look at custom treatment to date, it's only made it through about 4 to 6% of the population. So custom braces have not taken over. And a lot of people are like, well, if they would have taken over, they should have taken over by now. But hopefully you kind of realize that the cost and the value were way out of skew. But also these clinical issues that we've been discussing, not filling the slot really totally disregards the benefits of doing a custom solution. And a lot of the custom solutions early on did not do slot filling mechanics. Another really big one was a lot of the IDBs of the more popular systems would rock up to 1 millimeter on the teeth. And so if you spend 30 minutes and $1,000 doing a digital custom prescription, and you can't even get the brackets in the right position on the teeth, then what's the point of that either? So it's also really important that we've got an extremely accurate bonding tray so we can duplicate the real world, what we've done digitally. Not only though are there those clinical issues, but the bigger ones I think really had to do everything with practice management. So price point, I'll dive into this a little bit, way too expensive for custom. Turnaround time, rather than being able to put braces on the same day, you have to wait 5 to 7 weeks. And then also some of the systems, you are sitting at the computer for 30 minutes per patient. And if you're doing 10 cases a month, that's a significant amount of time sitting at the computer. And so those are all things that just weren't viable for custom solutions to be worthwhile. And so the way I describe this whole platform of KLOwen, especially to kind of people who aren't inside of our industry, is I want you to think about how we purchase shoes. And I want you to think about how we do shoes today, or how we do braces today would be like walking into a shoe store and having the salesperson say, I only have size 16 shoes, but I have some foam inserts here, and I'm going to spend the next 1 to 2 hours cutting the foam so it fits around your foot, and we'll have a good contrast between that and the shoe. So you'll be able to walk out today with a reasonable pair of shoes that's going to be better than walking on the rocks with bare soles. So that's how we do it today, right? Is we have 1 hour to 2 hours of doctor time required to shape and customize and try and make it a one-size-fits-all system work for that individual patient. And we end up with something that is not quite as good as we could get if we were actually able to incorporate torque in every tooth and really get that thickness dialed in better in terms of first order. On the other end of the spectrum, what Insignia and SureSmile are is like walking into a shoe store and having the shoe salesperson say, I am going to make you the perfect pair of shoes. It's going to take 4 to 5 weeks for us to do it. It's going to cost you $1,000. Unfortunately, a lot of people wouldn't be able to buy those shoes. So what we've done is tried to look at the shoe model the way it actually is, where it drives massive value to the consumer without costing so much and taking so much time on the manufacturing end. So imagine walking into a shoe store and the shoes person saying, we're going to offer you a 100% custom shoe. You go and find the closest shape to your foot. So maybe it's in size 10. And the laces or the elastic or the Velcro straps are going to give you the last 5% of customization. So it's going to fit your foot perfectly. But the cool thing is we're going to have a shoe size that's close enough to your foot that's going to get you 95% of the customization, and the last 5% is actually built into the shoe itself. So we can walk into a shoe store and get something very, very valuable, very workable, a great solution that's custom to us, and it still only costs us $80 to $100 instead of that $1,000 like it would on the other end of the spectrum. So I think that that's the winning model. I think it's the only way to make it a viable solution for the future. And so what we've done is essentially created that shoe size kit. So we have every torque range that a tooth would possibly need to travel through. Every torque, we're always going to be within 5 degrees. And also we have a low profile, medium profile, and a high profile bracket. So we're always going to also be within 0.2 of a millimeter to the tooth surface with the bracket base, even including the torque. So you get 100% custom solution. If you need a 5 degree or a 7 degree torque, it's actually going to pick this +5 bracket, and then 2 degrees of prescription is actually going to be built in when you glue in the indirect bonding tray, when you glue the brace to the tooth. The last little bit of customization, like the shoelaces, is going to be built into that custom composite base that gets cured at the bonding appointment. So you're not making a base ahead of time, but you're making that last custom base. So 7 to 7, you get 100% customization, but we're doing 95% of the customization with the bracket shape, and then the final customization happens forming that bonding loop. So 27 brackets allows us to give you a full custom solution, which is really no more inventory than what most of us carry now for a traditional set of braces. Some other really cool features about this system are we made our slot filling. So we're not an 18 slot, we're not a 22 slot, we're a 19.5 slot. So when you put your 1925 wire in, there is very little play between that wire and the bracket slot. The other thing that we've done is we actually throw away about 11 brackets out of every 100 that are made to keep the tolerance range extremely tight. So we have by far the most accurate bracket in the MIM world, and in our range is almost 2 times more accurate than anything else out there. So we're always going to be, so you can see 0195 to 0198 is our slot tolerance range. And then if we're in a 19.5 slot using a 1925 wire, that means that you're always going to be less than 0.0008 inches, which is less play than any system that I'm aware of today. So it's really, really tight tolerances, which is fantastic. The other really nice thing is we offer hooks on the 3s and 4s and 5s. You can tell us where you want them. It's a little more inventory for you to have if you want to do this in office yourself. But we have hooks if you want them. Because we're not bending the wire hardly ever at all, especially behind the canines, I actually do not use hooks with my brackets and instead use a crimp-on hook. These MAO crimp-on hooks with the shark teeth on them don't slip and slide. They're very easy to apply. They're only $1.40 or $1.50 each. So that's the one that I tend to go for, but there's a ton of really good options out there right now. So it's great for hygiene. It's great for patient comfort to not have those hooks on. And since we're not having to do a lot of wire bending, it's so easy for us to put those on only when we need them and where we need them. So it's just a much better patient experience. So just like an aligner workflow, you scan the patient's teeth, you get a digital setup, you can go in and move the teeth yourself. And then once the doctor has approved that final setup, the software is automatically going to choose the perfect shape braces. So you can see the tight fit between the brackets and the teeth surfaces. And once that prescription is generated digitally, we print the indirect bonding trays, and then we load the trays with the perfect shape brackets. Everything's color coded. Most people use our lab to begin with. So we actually will do everything. We print the braces, brace trays, load them so they come ready to go. But we have a lot of offices that are actually buying their own 3D printers, and certain ones are of high enough quality that we validated to actually let you do this process completely in office if you would like to, which reduces the cost even more and actually shortens the turnaround time to 2 or 3 days. And by the end of the year, with the new AI software from DIBS, it'll be a same day capability, meaning you could scan a patient in the morning and put custom braces on that afternoon. So indirect bonding process, place the trays, cure, peel it away. And this is just fun to show a couple of our earliest cases that we bonded back in August, finishing up. Again, not super challenging, but a lot of times the first couple visits we're messing things up and making them worse before they get better. And so for us to see these cases transitioning in 4 months start to finish for that one, these are some fun ones. There are 2 cases that we did, first cases ever bonded by residents at University of Detroit Mercy last August. And you can think about how great we are at positioning brackets as residents, and yet you can see that the case progress in just 6 months, these residents have extremely well-controlled cases. There's not much left to do to finish these up. And so that's the fun part, is it really allows us to let the appliances carry so much more of the burden and take it away from the doctors without compromising quality at all. So want to go into a quick dive of the research. Um, there's a lot out there on SureSmile, and I think it's all pretty well done. These are all retrospective studies, but if we're looking at treatment time, every single one of these studies found that there was a significant savings in treatment time between conventional and SureSmile treatment. So you can kind of see the number of months in treatment across all of the studies. Out of Dave Sarver's office, Dr. Profit, with one of his residents, Dr. Weber, did this study in the JCO in 2013. And in Dr. Sarver's office, one of the best in the business, treatment time with Insignia Twin, not Insignia Damon, but Insignia Twin, which I think is a superior service than the Damon system, because it controls the slot variation much better. But 37% less time in braces, 40% fewer office visits, and the ABO score out of his office was that the Insignia cases treated with 20% raw scores better on the ABO index. So pretty powerful stuff. It really not only shows treatment time, office visits, but also improved outcomes when we look at that study. Another study that's been talked about in social media is a Penning study. So all the others, as I was mentioning, are retrospective. This was a prospective clinical trial, so very well designed study. And what they found was that there was no significant treatment time difference between Damon Insignia and conventional treatment. And there was also no significant difference in the PAR post-treatment index. They also noted that Insignia Damon cases in these offices had more loose brackets, and also they noted that it took much longer on the front end to do the digital setup. And certainly I would agree with all of those things. And just going back to the slot filling mechanics of Damon with Insignia, if you're not filling that slot, it's a 1925 wire and a 2330 essentially slot dimension. So when I was doing Insignia with Damon, I had to do tons of wire bending, and I didn't find that the value is there, even close to being there. If you're spending $1,000 and 30 minutes on the treatment planning part of it, and you still have to do significant amounts of detailing bends, yeah, it's tough to say that it's going to be a worthwhile system. So realize that this one is a great study design, but I want you to think that, okay, Damon Insignia in 2017 was using a 1925 finishing wire in a massive slot. And also, if you look at just the custom treatment time in the Penning study, it very well trends with what all of the SureSmile and all of the, and even the Weber study, it's right in the ballpark in terms of the Insignia cases treated out in about the same amount of time. The thing that I found really interesting with the Penning study, though, if you look at their conventional treatment time, is look how much faster it was than almost all of the, not only the custom solutions, but by all means, it was super efficient, and it was a super significant reduction between the conventional from all of the other studies and their Penning control group. So again, it's a great study design. It's a prospective clinical trial, but realize that these guys were doing treatment very, very efficiently. They were doing treatment in times that most of us and most of these other studies couldn't even hit using a custom solution. So great study, but I think we have to look at the overall body of research when we make our final conclusions about what is or isn't better for our patients. Some other things that came from the findings of all these studies, basically to summarize, is a lot of the studies found that there was a reduced number of visits between SureSmile or Insignia and conventional, but others did not. So it was always, at least though, as good or not statistically significant in terms of the number of visits. And then some of the studies found better outcomes, CAST radiograph evaluation scores. About half of them found that it was better with SureSmile or Insignia, and the other half found no statistical significant difference. So again, the custom was always at least as good or better than conventional, but sometimes there was not a statistically significant difference. So when we're thinking about something being worth it, I think we have to think about all of the ways we can unlock value from something. And the big one to me is, can we reduce office visits? Can we reduce doctor time? Because that's going to help us increase capacity. But I think it's also fun to look at solutions that can help us increase things like conversion rate and increase new patient exams. And we found with the offices that are using us that they actually are able to do both of these things. So that's the fun part of this, is what if you can actually attract more customers? You can get more of those customers to start with your office because you're offering a unique solution. Really fast too, I know I'm running short on time, but looking at an overhead per visit for a conventional treatment for most offices, somewhere between $150 and $200. So basically what this chart shows is, for you to use a self-ligating bracket, it's going to cost you $150 more than your twin with tubes. So you basically need to save yourself one visit in order to hit your break-even point. With Insignia and SureSmile, I always had a tough time because it would take 6 visits, assuming $150 overhead per visit, to hit my break-even point. With Invisalign, it's even more. So with KLOwen, we really wanted to get our price point to where we knew that the product was going to hit that break-even point on every case without having to charge the patient anymore. So our all-in kind of case fee, if you're doing it routinely, is about $395 a case. So I find that about 2 visits of office savings is a predictable thing for you to hit with this. But not only that, the doctor time savings is immense because you're not putting as many bends in the wire as you used to have to and doing as many repositions. So this is probably, to me, the biggest savings, is how much time we can save when you're, as the doctor, being able to get things through. Same thing with Invisalign. You can see patients fewer visits with way less doctor intervention, and that's why it's worth paying the hefty lab bill with Invisalign. These are some ways that you can look at increasing top line revenue by helping with conversion rate and new patients. It really just has to do with scripting and marketing, but just another value add. And I think one of the coolest parts of this whole thing is offices that are using us have found similar efficiencies that they were finding with Invisalign and some of these other aligner systems. So in terms of doctor time utilization, if custom digital braces can provide the same doctor efficiencies as these really expensive aligners, you can see that with 15 cases a month, if I were going to be an all-in Invisalign office, and this is about how much we were doing for comprehensive cases per month in my old office, the lab bill would have been $90,000 more than what KLOwen's lab bill is. So it is very cost prohibitive, I felt. And full aligners, if we can offer this even similar efficiencies to what any of the full service aligner systems are doing, at 15 cases a month, you can really see savings per year. Even at half that amount is massive savings. So really, trying to find ways to put money back in orthodontist pocket while still offering these same efficiencies is really what we've been kind of directed towards. And I think there's going to be systems like ours. I know there's some other new custom systems that are emerging with better price points as well. So I think it's a really exciting thing to see the industry finally trending towards customized individual solutions for every patient. Some other things I just wanted to mention briefly is we're kicking off our new Generation 3 product with way better indirect bonding trays. There's a new resin that I was able to help kind of finalize with Keystone that is really going to make the bonding process so much more streamlined. DIBS AI software at OrthoSelect uses 33 algorithms to do the ideal setup for you in office in just a matter of 10, 15 minutes. So it's truly revolutionary breakthrough software. And then we just have a lot of new things that are changing in terms of marketing and promotional materials. So I really appreciate you guys sitting and spending time with me this morning. Here are all the research articles that I referenced. And if you ever have any questions, please email me. This is my direct email address, Brandon at KLOwenbraces.com. Thanks so much.